Leadership is not about power, it's about service. Well, that's a quote from Suharto, not Keir Starmer, in the 1980s, which just goes to prove a lot of politicians will say one thing but mean another. So, chronologically, in 1985, Borobudur officially opened to the public. Of course, a fantastic Buddhist stupa, the biggest in the world, and now attracts millions of viewers a year. It's an amazing sight, and of course it's a must-see if ever you're in Georgia. A must-see, but book early. My nephew had a chance to go, but it was fully booked for the day because now they have quotas. To me that's ridiculous, but nevertheless, don't forget to book. Okay, in '86 I arrived, and one of the nice things when I arrived compared to, okay, so this is my second arrival. I'd been to Indonesia for a couple of weeks, went to Australia for my 6-month work visa, came back. So when I say I arrived, it's my second arrival. But this is the time where I would start living and working and becoming an Indonesian. And in '86, the rupiah was devalued. I didn't actually have a lot of Aussie dollars. If I'm not wrong, it went from something like 900 rupiah to about 1800 rupiah in sterling. So you can work the rest out. In '87, my first general election, and the elections were amazing, very colourful in Jakarta and probably outside as well. Every day you'd have different parties rallying, and they'd take out all the streets, and it was really colourful. What might surprise you is generally it was the same people rallying for the same parties, and in the end it was all irrelevant because Golkar always won. And in '88, the Reformasi people started talking about reform. It wasn't against Suharto as much as, look, we have to change tact, we have to change plans. So when I arrived, it was very obvious that Indonesia was still a developing country. Every year, with your work permit, you had to go to Singapore. And throughout the 80s, you'd notice how quickly Singapore was developing. My first year, I believe in '86, the MRT opened in Singapore. Jakarta wouldn't get one for 35, 40 more years. A huge mistake at the time, I think. It was an intent shown by Singapore. We're willing to put money into development. And Suharto missed a trick, or at least his government did, by not starting an MRT in Jakarta. In Jakarta, road widening, apartments did begin to shoot up in the mid-80s, and you could see the difference. However, I remember going to Toraja in, I think, '88, and again, once you're out of the city, rural life didn't change. I was to go back in, I think, 2008, very little change. So it was the cities and Bali that saw the major changes in the next 10, even 20 years. So again, the difference between rural and urban started to increase rather than decrease. The Transmigrasi program almost ended by the mid-80s. It had a lot of bad press. A lot of the transmigrants were actually coming back from their places because in many ways they weren't welcome. Another thing you'd see when you went outside of Jakarta was the Dua Cukup signs. So because of the IMF World Bank, Indonesia was pressured to keep their population down. This was a population boom in the 80s and the 70s. So they had a Dua Cukup, which means 2 children enough. I don't know about urban-wise, but definitely in the cities, people were still having 3 or 4 kids. Of course, on the whole, people were wealthier in the cities, but I don't think it was sustainable asking Indonesians to only have 2 children. They were given incentives, of course, if they stuck to that rule, and it was a program, as I say, sanctioned by the IMF and World Bank. So here's the UN again influencing how Indonesia's policies were. In Suharto's cabinet, the name Habibie, that's B.J. Habibie, started to come to the fore. He gave special attention to developing aerospace and also technology, and he was quite a star of the show. Another star was Harmoko, who would, what would I say, pressure the press to keep it good, keep it nice, keep it friendly. He had such a charming smile, but if Compass or some of the major newspaper outlets came out of line, boom, they either got sanctioned or closed down. Now, there was also a loss of revenue by oil, because at this time the oil prices started to stutter. It was still a main source of income, but with the devaluation, Indonesia started looking at exports. And of course, Indonesia was in a good way because the devaluation of the rupiah made the cost of exporting much cheaper for foreign countries. Hyundai, Nike, and tons of foreigners flooded Indonesia, especially Jakarta. As regulations lowered, tax remained almost non-existent. The wealthy, whether Indonesian or whether expat, lived what I would call an Elton John lifestyle. In other words, in America or the UK, you would need heavy money to live this lifestyle. But me included, we could have a maid, we could have a driver, we could have a nanny, you name it. The cost was so small, the regulations so minimal. So even if a minister, and this is a top government official, was on $3,000 or $4,000, let's say, a month, and that's probably over-exaggerating, he'd be living in a mansion, driving a luxurious car, having a Rolex. Nobody checked, nobody cared. However, the majority, and we're talking 90, maybe 95% of the population, were still struggling. And one of the main reasons, in my opinion, was education. Compared to Singapore and Malaysia, the Indonesian school system was weak. A lot of kids were getting rote learning, just learning a bunch of facts. It wasn't good for critical thinking, so it kept the masses down. And this is an area that I feel passionately about. A lot of Indonesians would send their kids to private schools, international schools, to get out of the public school system. Obviously, the other advantage was English, because English was the key to success. Whether pollution, whether traffic jams, whether somebody extorting money, there was one thing that all Indonesians still had, and that was a smile.